What you see here, almost like a little in Vegas, you don't share with anybody. So it was difficult to be with some of the women who were married.
What if the true story of Elvis Presley isn't found in medical records, but in the quiet pain of those who loved him most? For years, Priscilla Presley guarded his legacy, keeping the heartache, the truth, and the untold moments to herself. But now, after 52 years of silence, she's ready to reveal what went on behind closed doors, the side of Elvis's life the public never saw. Was his death simply due to heart failure? Or was there something more beneath the surface? In this video, we'll uncover Priscilla's emotional revelations, her memories, her sorrow, and what she hopes people will finally understand about the man behind the legend. The Day the King Fell, What the Records Say. August 16, 1977. It's a date carved into the soul of music history. On that day, the music world lost a king. Elvis Presley, just 42 years old, was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion in Memphis, Tennessee. The man who revolutionized rock and roll was gone. Time seemed to freeze. Fans across the globe were left in shock, their grief pouring into the streets, onto record players, and through tearful radio tributes. Reporters scrambled to piece together the final moments of a legend's life. For decades, the story that unfolded that morning stood as the accepted truth, the tragic finale of a life lived too fast and too hard. But now, after 52 years of silence, Priscilla Presley steps forward with a version of events that threatens to rewrite everything we thought we knew. According to the official account, Elvis suffered a massive cardiac arrest. He was rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital, but doctors couldn't save him. The cause of death? Heart failure. At the time, it seemed plausible, even inevitable. Elvis had become a shadow of his former self. Maybe because of that, the world accepted the narrative. A beloved icon crumbling under the weight of fame, addiction, and physical decline. Outside Graceland, what had been the sanctuary of musical brilliance became a shrine of sorrow. Within hours, heartbroken fans filled the gates, clutching candles and photos, singing his songs through trembling voices. The grief was raw and immediate. TV anchors delivered the news with reverent gravity. Across living rooms, the black and white images of Elvis's life flickered like a national wake. RCA Records, caught off guard, scrambled to reissue his albums as demand surged overnight. Radio stations flooded the airwaves with Elvis's greatest hits. But even then, whispers lingered. Something about the story felt unfinished, too neat, too convenient. Now, Priscilla is ready to open up, to pull back the curtain on what really happened in Elvis's final days. Her memories, long kept private, suggest a deeper, more complex truth behind the king's downfall. Was it truly just a failing heart, or was there something far more human, more heartbreaking at play? In the Shadow of Goodbye, Priscilla Presley's quiet grief. On the morning of August 16, 1977, Priscilla Presley was heading to an appointment when the phone rang. The voice on the other end told her something she had quietly feared for years. Elvis was gone. At first she couldn't speak. Her body went still. Her mind spun. She described the moment later as stepping into a maze with no exit, spiraling downward without control. The music world had lost its king, but Priscilla had lost her first love, the father of her child, the man who had shaped her world since she was just 14 years old. The pain didn't come all at once. At first, it was silent, stillness. Then, as hours passed, it became a storm of feelings she couldn't contain. Shock, sadness, confusion, and an emptiness that lingered for months. Priscilla didn't break down immediately. She couldn't. She had to be strong for Lisa Marie, who was only 9. Her daughter didn't know what had happened yet. So, Priscilla did what any mother would do. She protected her. But she needed to Lisa. And she did. "We're going to Graceland," she told Lisa gently. "Daddy needs to rest." It was the only way she could say it. Not yet the full truth. Not yet the heartbreak. Behind the scenes, everything was chaos. News cameras, reporters, fans all surrounding Graceland. The world wanted answers, headlines, details. But inside Priscilla's heart, all she wanted was quiet, a moment to breathe, a place to hide. So she took Lisa Marie and her sister to Europe for 2 weeks, escaping the eyes of the world. She needed time to grieve, time to understand, time to shield Lisa Marie from the noise, even just for a little while. And yet, even far away, the grief followed. Elvis had been more than a global icon to Priscilla. He had been her beginning, her compass, her confusion, and even after their divorce, he had remained a part of her every day. They talked often. They shared stories about Lisa. She knew his struggles, his moods, his pain, the way fame had turned his home into a prison. She had tried, once, to help, but he was a man who resisted help from anyone, even those who loved him most. After his death, people began asking questions. Why didn't someone stop him? Why didn't Priscilla intervene? But they didn't know Elvis like she did. They didn't see the loneliness behind the spotlight, or how quickly he would pull away from anyone who tried to fix him. They didn't understand how tightly he held on to control, even as it slipped through his fingers. In public, Priscilla was composed, polite, careful with her words. She spoke kindly of Elvis. She praised his music, his heart, his love for Lisa. But what she didn't share, not then, was how deeply she was hurting, or how dark his final years had truly been. Behind closed doors, she cried. She wandered through memories. She held her daughter tightly and tried to be both mother and father at once. And then came the burden of legacy. Graceland, the place Elvis had once filled with laughter, music, and life, was falling apart. Money was running out. Elvis Presley Enterprises was nearly bankrupt. The estate couldn't afford to keep the house closed and private. Advisors warned Priscilla to walk away, sell it, let it go. But she couldn't. Not because of pride, but because of love. Graceland wasn't just a home. It was a promise. To Elvis, to Lisa Marie, to every fan who still believed in the dream. So, with no business experience, Priscilla took over. She turned the estate into something new. In 1982, Graceland opened to the public. The house where Elvis once walked became a place for others to walk, to remember, and to feel close to him again. Visitors came by the thousands, then millions. Graceland became one of the most visited private homes in the world. It wasn't just a smart decision, it was a vow, a way to keep his memory alive, not just as a singer, but as a man, a father, and a legend. Still, even with the success, Priscilla never forgot the weight of that phone call, the way the world seemed to fall apart in an instant. Years later, she admitted that the subject of Elvis still made her emotional. She couldn't speak of him without feeling something deep stir inside, something unresolved. And after 52 years, she finally began to tell more of her truth. She spoke of the silence she kept for so long, of the lies people accepted to keep his legacy clean, of how the real story, the painful, complicated, human story, had stayed hidden. She said Elvis's death wasn't just about a heart giving out. It was about everything that had led up to it. The pressure, the loneliness, the silence around his struggles, the weight he carried and couldn't share. She had stayed silent because she didn't want to damage his image. The world needed Elvis to be strong, smooth, and golden. She wanted to protect that for Lisa, for the fans, for history, but time changes things. And Priscilla finally let herself speak, not with anger, but with honesty. She shared how hard it was to watch someone you love slowly fade, how impossible it is to help someone who doesn't want help, and how grief never fully leaves, no matter how much time passes. But who exactly was Elvis behind closed doors? The man the world didn't know, Elvis. Behind closed doors, to millions, Elvis Presley was the dazzling star in rhinestone-studded jumpsuits, shaking arenas with his voice and presence. He was the king, a living legend, untouchable and eternal. But behind the bright lights and blaring music, inside the walls of Graceland, lived a very different man, a man the world didn't really know. Priscilla Presley, who knew him longer and more intimately than almost anyone, once said it clearly: "You didn't live your own life. You lived with him." Elvis Presley was complicated. He was kind, generous, magnetic, and also troubled, lost, and deeply insecure. Graceland was Elvis's castle, but it was also his cage. The mansion was carefully controlled, curtains drawn tight, phones monitored, visitors handpicked. It was a place meant to protect him from the world, but it also separated him from reality. He rarely left. The outside world became too much, too loud, too demanding, too cruel. At his peak, he was the most famous man in America, maybe the world. His name was everywhere, but often he couldn't bear to leave his bedroom. There were days when he wouldn't come downstairs, nights when he wandered the halls alone. He suffered from chronic insomnia. Sleep was nearly impossible without pills, and waking up meant taking something else. Stimulants to rise, sedatives to fall. The cycle became routine. There was no in-between, Priscilla said. He was always trying to slow down or speed up, never just still. Elvis's heart was huge. He gave freely, sometimes recklessly. He bought friends new cars, paid off debts, and gifted jewelry just because someone admired it. He was loyal to the people he loved, especially the group of friends known as the Memphis Mafia. They were more than friends. They were his protectors, his companions, his wall against the world. But even within that circle, there were rules. Elvis liked to be in control. The music played in the house, the films they watched, the guests they welcomed, all had to be approved by him. If someone questioned him too much, they were gone. If they suggested he slow down or get help, he cut them off. He didn't want help, he just wanted escape. Elvis's relationship with Priscilla was marked by both deep affection and deep tension. They had met when she was just 14. She had grown up in his world, shaped by his rhythms. But being with Elvis wasn't easy. It meant living his life on his terms. After Lisa Marie was born, their relationship changed. Elvis, for reasons he never fully explained, withdrew. He grew distant. There were moments of warmth, but also cold silence. At times, it turned cruel. Priscilla recalled moments of emotional and even physical harm, like the time he threw a chair at her for criticizing a song. He didn't want to be challenged, she said. He needed to feel in control. And still, she stayed for years, trying to understand the man beneath the crown. To the outside world, Elvis seemed larger than life, but in private, he was shrinking. The pressure to stay relevant, to stay loved, to stay on top, it chipped away at him. He became moody. He stopped going out. He stopped listening. He stopped trusting. The drugs weren't just for sleep or energy. They were to silence the noise in his head, the fear, the sadness, the self-doubt. Priscilla remembered one night in particular. After a show, she found him slumped on a couch, surrounded by pill bottles. He looked at her with hollow eyes and whispered, "I just want to sleep. I don't want to feel this way anymore." While it broke her at that moment, it still haunts her. "I didn't know what to say," she later admitted. "I wish I could have helped him, but he wouldn't let anyone close enough." Many believe the man meant to protect Elvis. His longtime manager, Colonel Tom Parker, only made things worse. Parker kept Elvis working constantly, scheduling tour after tour, pushing him even as his health declined. Fame was their business, and business had to keep going. Priscilla has hinted that Parker saw Elvis not as a person, but as a product. When Elvis should have been resting or recovering, Parker had him on the road. Concerts, TV specials, movies. Money always comes before well-being. Elvis was unraveling, Priscilla said, and nobody stopped it. Some didn't care, some didn't see it, and some of us, we just didn't know how. Elvis was full of contradictions. He was deeply spiritual, reading books on religion, praying often, seeking peace in quiet moments. And yet, he was also chaotic, impulsive, and sometimes lost in his own fantasy world. He could be the life of the party one night, and silent for days after. He could laugh until tears streamed down his face, and then disappear into his room without a word. The man who had everything still felt like he had something missing. He was, in many ways, a prisoner of fame, trapped by expectations, frozen in time, and unable to fully be himself. After his death, Priscilla rarely spoke about the darker parts of their life together. She wanted to protect his image, but in her later years, she began to open up, not to tarnish Elvis, but to humanize him, to show the man behind the myth Not the king, but the broken soul who just wanted rest. Elvis was beautiful, she said, but he was also hurting, and I don't think he ever really knew how to ask for help. Even today, she sometimes dreams of him. Not the performer, but the man in the pajamas at 3 a.m. asking if she wants to watch a movie or walk the halls of Graceland one more time. The world may remember Elvis Presley as the king of rock and roll, but behind the stage lights and screaming fans, he was a man of fragile strength, a man who gave joy to millions but couldn't always find peace for himself. He was funny, loving, sharp, and endlessly talented. But he was also isolated, guarded, and deeply scarred by a fame that never released its grip. That's the Elvis the world rarely saw. Did his greatness come at a cost far higher than it ever should have been? The hidden cost of greatness. Elvis Presley lived under bright lights and roaring crowds, but behind the curtain was a man slowly breaking. The rhinestone jumpsuits, the powerful voice, the signature sneer, all of it masked the truth. What the world saw was a legend. What Priscilla saw was a man unraveling, bit by bit, pill by pill. By the late 1960s, Elvis was no longer just a star, he was an empire, and empires are heavy. He needed to perform, to earn, to keep people paid and the machine running. He once said, "You have to make payroll. These people depend on me." That pressure, combined with years of fame and isolation, turned deadly. At the center of this tragic cycle was Dr. George C. Nicopolis, known to most as Dr. Nick. He became Elvis's personal physician in 1967 and stayed by his side until the singer's death in 1977. Wherever Elvis went, Dr. Nick was never far behind. Neither were the pills. The medications were constant. Uppers to get Elvis out of bed, downers to help him sleep, barbiturates, amphetamines, tranquilizers, painkillers, each neatly labeled, carried in suitcases like travel essentials. When Elvis complained of pain or fatigue, there was a bottle for that. When he needed energy, focus, or escape, there was a pill ready. In just the final 20 months of his life, Dr. Nick reportedly prescribed over 12,000 doses of medication, an average of more than 20 pills per day. Some prescriptions were for members of his entourage, but insiders say most were for Elvis himself. He wasn't in control anymore. When he felt weak, he took Valium. When he felt slow, he used Dexedrine. When the pain in his back and joints became unbearable, he took powerful opioids that left him unable to finish a sentence. Some days, the pills blurred reality. Other days, they were the only thing keeping him upright. And still, he performed. By the mid-70s, it was no secret backstage that Elvis was struggling. Before shows, his crew would dunk his head into ice water just to wake him. On stage, he sometimes slurred his words or forgot lyrics. He would grip the microphone stand like it was holding him up. Afterward, he'd collapse into bed, needing help just to remove his boots. But the audiences never saw this part. The king was always expected to deliver, and Colonel Tom Parker made sure of that. Parker helped launch Elvis's career in the 50s and stayed with him until the very end. He was a master promoter, the man behind the movie deals, the Vegas residencies, and the global brand. But behind the success was something darker. He took 25%, then sometimes 50% of Elvis's earnings, far more than the standard management fee. He blocked Elvis from touring internationally, possibly because Parker himself was an illegal immigrant and feared being exposed. He pushed Elvis into dozens of formulaic films, even when the singer wanted to return to serious music. According to Priscilla Presley, Parker didn't care about Elvis's health. He cared about keeping the money flowing. Even when Elvis could barely stay awake, Parker booked more shows. Even when Elvis begged for time to rest, Parker threatened to walk. The pressure wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent, constant, and unrelenting. And over time, Elvis stopped resisting. He just took more pills and grew more distant. Inside Graceland, Elvis had surrounded himself with people, bodyguards, assistants, old friends, but he had also walled himself off from the world. Curtains stayed closed, doors stayed locked. Some days he wouldn't speak to anyone. Other days, he'd call friends in the middle of the night, needing company or comfort. Priscilla saw it all. The mood swings, the physical changes, the exhaustion. She knew something was wrong, something no one else wanted to admit. People said he was just tired, just bloated, just getting older. But she knew better. After Elvis's death, Dr. Nick came under fire. Many believed he had contributed to the singer's downfall through careless overprescription. He defended himself, saying he was trying to manage a difficult situation, a patient with chronic pain, a crushing schedule, and dozens of people depending on him. Dr. Nick later admitted that perhaps he had made mistakes. In 1980, his medical license was suspended briefly. In 1995, he lost it permanently after more accusations of overprescribing medications, including to other celebrities like Jerry Lee Lewis. Whether he was trying to help or simply enabling a spiraling star is still debated. But the damage was done. Even in his final weeks, Elvis was still scheduled to tour. His body was swollen, his speech slurred, and his energy gone. But the calendar was full. People depended on him. The Colonel demanded it. Fans expected it. One friend said Elvis confessed, "I don't think I can go on." But he went anyway. He was carrying the weight of his fame, his fortune, and the lives of everyone around him, and it was crushing him. The Hidden Letter. In the decades since Elvis Presley's death, the world has mostly accepted the official version, a heart weakened by years of stress, medication, and a demanding lifestyle. People mourned a fallen star, a man who had given everything to his music, only to be claimed by fate at the young age of 42. But what if fate wasn't the only force at play? What if there was something else? Something whispered, written, and quietly passed behind closed doors. The world didn't know about the note. For years, it remained hidden, folded in silence. A small slip of paper passed privately from Elvis Presley to his close friend and aide Joe Esposito just weeks before his death. It contained only 8 words: "I'm sick and tired of my life." Those words weren't public. They weren't included in the official reports or autopsy records. They weren't discussed in interviews or documentaries. But Priscilla Presley knew about them. She had seen the note. She had held it. She had stayed silent. In a recent interview, Priscilla finally confirmed what many had only suspected. The letter was real. It was short, raw, and unmistakable in its meaning. Elvis had written it during a quiet moment, one of many when he felt trapped by his body, his fame, and the expectations of the world. He didn't always say how he felt, but he would write it down. That was his way. The letter wasn't part of a longer explanation. It wasn't a cry for help sent to the media or his fans. It was private, personal, just one chilling line, scribbled in solitude. For years, Priscilla stood by the official story, that Elvis's death was the tragic but natural end of a man under pressure. A heart attack, exhaustion, the cost of fame. But when she revisited the letter and the memories it stirred, those beliefs began to crumble. She began rereading old journals, listening to tapes, and looking at unpublished photos from Elvis's final months. What she found painted a very different picture. She described photos that showed him hollowed out, his eyes dull, his smile forced. She remembered his late-night sobbing, moments where he spoke about the past like it was all he had left, like the future no longer existed. She stopped short of calling Elvis's death a suicide. There was no final letter left out in the open, no instructions or goodbyes. But the signs to her are now impossible to ignore. The note to Joe, the refusal to seek help, the increasing isolation, the endless pills that dulled everything until there was almost nothing left. Maybe he didn't plan it like people think of suicide. Maybe he had stopped fighting for his life long before that last day. It wasn't an act of sudden desperation. It was a slow surrender. What was the final day of Elvis Presley like? How did the king spend his last day? The last hour of Elvis Presley, a final fade into silence. The final day of Elvis Presley's life, August 16, 1977, began like so many before it, late, quiet, and restless. For the man who had once electrified the world, the end didn't come with thunder or fanfare. It came in silence, in the shadows of Graceland, and with small, seemingly ordinary moments that only later revealed their weight. Elvis, true to his well-known nocturnal schedule, was awake through the night of August 15th into the early morning of the 16th. Sleep had long been a stranger to him. Around midnight, he played racquetball with his cousin Billy Smith and Billy's wife Jo. Despite his heavy frame and labored movements, Elvis laughed and joked during the game. He was slower than he used to be, but for a moment he seemed light again. Later, he drifted into the piano room, unable to settle down. There, in the stillness of Graceland, Elvis sat at the keys alone and sang softly into the morning dark. One of the songs was Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. It would be the last song he ever sang. At around 4 a.m., in a strange turn, Elvis left home for a dental appointment. Some believe it was a genuine visit. Others suspect it was just another excuse to obtain more medication, something his life had increasingly revolved around. Whatever the reason, he returned to Graceland shortly after. By then, the sun was rising, and his fiancée Ginger Alden was growing tired. Elvis took more pills, sedatives, perhaps sleeping pills, hoping to finally drift off. But sleep did not come. Ginger eventually fell asleep beside him. Around 2 p.m., Ginger woke. She noticed the bed was empty. At first, it didn't worry her. Elvis often roamed the house or went to read in the bathroom. But when she called for him and got no answer, a chill set in. She walked toward the master bathroom, calling his name. And there on the floor she found him, face down, motionless. Ginger panicked. She rushed to the intercom system and called for help. Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager and one of his closest friends, came running. He turned Elvis over, touched his skin, and felt the awful stillness of a body that had gone cold. Still, emergency services were called. Paramedics arrived quickly and rushed Elvis to Baptist Memorial Hospital. Doctors worked frantically, trying to revive the man whose voice had once shaken the world. But it was too late. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Elvis Aaron Presley was pronounced dead. He was just 42 years old. Priscilla Presley's final confession. For over 5 decades, Priscilla Presley remained the dignified protector of Elvis's legacy. She spoke lovingly of his talent, charm, and larger-than-life presence, while quietly shielding the more painful truths. Now, in what she calls her final confession, Priscilla is opening up about the man behind the music. Not just a legend, but a deeply wounded soul. Elvis Presley's decline wasn't just physical. According to Priscilla, his emotional pain ran far deeper than most ever realized. In interviews, she recalls how Elvis would retreat into silence, staring out windows for hours, distant and unreachable. Though adored by millions, he often felt lost and hollow. Priscilla admitted he was carrying too much. Their marriage also carried heavy burdens. Infidelity and emotional distance strained their relationship. Priscilla confessed she felt like an outsider in her own home, not only due to other women, but because Elvis belonged more to his fans than to her. He expected her to look perfect at all times, never to be seen getting dressed or without makeup. He had a very specific image of what he wanted me to be, she said, describing how she slowly lost her sense of self. Their final conversation was unremarkable, about their daughter Lisa Marie, but in hindsight, it felt final. He promised, "We'll talk when you're back." She never heard his voice again. Priscilla describes Elvis as haunted by the loss of his mother, by the pressures of fame, and by the feeling that he could never live up to the image the world expected. He was drowning in pills, grief, and emotional isolation. She doesn't call his death a suicide, but believes it was a slow surrender. Priscilla's confession isn't meant to tarnish his legacy, but to humanize it. Elvis wasn't just the king. He was a man in pain, trying to hold on, trying to live, even as the world watched him fade. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.